The snake never panics when you roar. It panics when you stop crawling where it expected you to be. My dear chosen ones, that's the kind of shift you made without even realizing it. You didn't throw a punch. You didn't wage a war. You didn't storm into anyone's life demanding recognition or respect. You simply stood up on the inside, and the sound of that quiet rise hit them harder than any scream ever could. While you were just living your life, choosing calm over chaos, choosing growth over noise, they felt the ground tilt under their feet, like someone pulled the rug off their entire strategy. They've been replaying that moment ever since, trying to figure out how you managed to break a system you weren't even trying to escape. Here's your idiomatic title, reshaped to cut deeper. You shook the hornet's nest without lifting a finger, and they're the ones running. Now listen closely, chosen ones. People aren't losing sleep because you turned into some unstoppable force overnight. They're losing sleep because you finally stopped being the version of yourself that made their life easy. They depended on your uncertainty the way a leech depends on a warm vein. They counted on your hesitation like it was guaranteed. They assumed you'd stay predictable, agreeable, manageable. But life has a funny way of flipping scripts the moment you stop reading from the pages they wrote for you. You weren't even trying to make a statement. You were just minding your own business, maybe drinking your water, maybe taking a breath you actually deserved. While somewhere out there, someone felt their power slipping like sand through their fingers. That's the quiet beauty of being chosen. Your evolution doesn't need a spotlight to hit its mark. The people who bet against you feel it before anyone else sees it. And you might still be asking yourself, what did I even do? Why is my existence shaking people who never admitted they cared in the first place? Chosen ones, here's your answer. You stopped shrinking. You stopped apologizing for having a mind. You stopped bending because someone else preferred you bent. You stopped reacting on command like you were programmed for their convenience. You broke the unspoken choreography, and they're still tripping over steps that only worked when you agreed to perform. Before we go any further, my dear chosen ones, if this message is already stirring something in you, if it's reminding you of your strength, your value, and your unstoppable rise, then take a moment to support this movement. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and help us keep creating content that fuels your growth, sharpens your clarity, and energizes your journey. Your support allows us to pour more time, more intention, and more fire into bringing you the insights that shift your mindset and elevate your life. Your engagement truly matters. Your growth didn't shout, it whispered. And nothing rattles an insecure person more than a whisper they can't locate or control. Think of it like a chessboard they thought they owned. They had you placed neatly in a corner, convinced you'd stay there forever. But suddenly, the piece they underestimated became the one that changes the entire match. Not because you attacked, not because you plotted, but because you moved differently. Because you realized you had more options than the ones they offered. You didn't break the rules, you rewrote the rhythm, let them deal with the shock of that. Chosen ones, the tension around your presence now. It's not accidental. It's not random. It's not because you did something reckless. It's because you did something necessary. You reclaimed the part of yourself they hoped you'd never notice. Your clarity became the flashlight they never wanted pointed in their direction. Your strength became the proof they didn't want exposed. Your peace became the one thing they couldn't manipulate. And the irony, the part that stings them the most, is that you still don't fully understand the extent of your shift. You're still piecing together the version of you that quietly emerged. You're still learning the power of not responding, not begging, not explaining, not performing. Meanwhile, they're scrambling to adjust to a reality where their influence no longer reaches you. Why does my change bother them so much? Because they built their comfort on your confusion. They built their confidence on your silence. They built their control on your willingness to doubt yourself. And now the game is off balance. The match is uneven. The old tricks don't work. The old lines don't land. The old patterns fall flat. You didn't just evolve, chosen ones. You became the one variable they never prepared for, a person who knows their worth. The stage is shifting, the curtain is lifting, and you are stepping into a version of yourself they hoped would never exist. And whether you meant to or not, you've become the quiet storm that exposes everything built on fragile foundations. Get ready. The real story starts now. My dear chosen ones, before we go any deeper, let me say this clearly. You are the reason this message exists. Your strength, your growth, your evolution. That's what fuels this channel. If you want us to keep bringing you content that wakes you up, sharpens your mind, and reminds you exactly why they're terrified of your rise, then show your support. Hit that like button, subscribe, and if this message already feels like it's speaking your truth, drop the number 77 in the comments to let me know you're locked in. And if you feel called, use super thanks to keep this mission alive. Now, take a breath, chosen one, because what comes next will feel like someone finally put words to what you've been experiencing all along. Only the chosen can recognize these signs. Ordinary people can't. Let's step into it. Number 1, the moment you shattered the illusion of their power, you pulled the rug out from under them without even trying. Nothing exposes a pretender faster than the moment you stop dancing to their tune. My dear chosen ones, this is where the story gets deliciously uncomfortable for the people who thought they had you all figured out. They walked through life believing they had a permanent backstage pass to your mind, your reactions, your emotions. They thought you were predictable, programmable, and pliable. But without warning, without strategy, without even knowing you were doing it, you shook the ground right out from under them. And what makes it even more poetic? You didn't do it with force. You did it by simply being you. Finally, fully, unapologetically. You didn't need to raise your voice. You didn't need to stage a revolution. You didn't need to slam doors or set boundaries with theatrical flair. No, chosen ones like you don't need fireworks. You shifted quietly, and your quiet was louder than anything they ever used to keep you under their thumb. Your silence spoke. Your evolution screamed. Your clarity punched holes in every illusion they spent years crafting. And maybe you're wondering right now, why does my growth bother them so much? Why does my peace seem to shake their entire world? Because chosen ones, people built on control, cannot survive in a world where you no longer need their approval. Their influence was never real power. It was borrowed power, borrowed from your uncertainty, your hesitation, your self-doubt. The moment you stopped feeding that ecosystem, it crumbled like a house of cards in a storm. They counted on you second-guessing yourself. They relied on your emotional responses like oxygen. Every guilt trip, every subtle dig, every manipulative whisper, those were their tools. They treated their tactics like armor, believing it made them untouchable. But armor made of ego shatters the moment it meets someone who no longer plays the role they assigned. And you, chosen one, walked right off the script. You didn't mean to expose their fragility. That's the best part. You weren't trying to break them. You weren't plotting, preparing, or aiming for some dramatic unveiling. You were just done shrinking, done bending, done explaining, done participating in the circus they expected you to perform in. And when you stepped outside that familiar pattern, when you simply lived as a person who finally recognized their own worth, they felt the shift instantly. They didn't expect you to notice the cracks. They definitely didn't expect you to thrive while those cracks widened. They thought their smallness could contain your becoming. They thought the cage they built was your destiny. But then you did the unthinkable. You outgrew it. And nothing terrifies someone who survives off control more than the moment their influence becomes irrelevant. See, they always believed they were the puppeteer. What they never considered is the moment the puppet realizes the strings were never tied as tightly as they imagined. You standing tall, calm, self-directed, self-respecting, pulled every string loose without lifting a finger. Their illusion of dominance, superiority, and emotional leverage evaporated before their eyes. And there you were, minding your business, drinking your water, choosing peace. Chosen ones, your existence outside their framework is the biggest plot twist they never prepared for. You became proof that their power was conditional. Their influence depended entirely on you staying small. And now, you're not small, you're not confused, you're not compliant, you're not playing a role written by someone who never intended to see you win. As soon as you stepped into your clarity, their mask slipped. As soon as you grew, their shadow shrank. As soon as you opened your eyes, their strategies turned to dust. And the truth that terrifies them most is this: you didn't just escape their influence, you exposed it. Their strength was performance, their control was illusion, their confidence was camouflage, and you, without trying, without announcing, without raising a single alarm, pulled the rug out from under them and left them standing on their own instability. You became unpredictable. You became untouchable. You became someone who no longer dances for the comfort of those who once relied on your confusion. And that realization hits them harder than any confrontation ever could. Chosen ones, this is the moment they realized the game was over. Not because you destroyed them, but because you stopped playing. Number 2, when you outgrew the narrative, they tried to trap you in. When you tore the pages out of their script and walked off the stage they built for you. The moment a chosen one stops performing, the whole theater falls apart, because the show only existed as long as you played along. My dear chosen ones, let this sink in. Nothing shakes the people who tried to control you more than realizing that the story they wrote for you has completely collapsed. And here's the twist. They didn't lose control because you shouted, pointed fingers, or exposed them publicly. They lost control because you quietly stopped reciting the lines they handed you. You simply walked off their stage. And trust me, nothing terrifies a manipulator more than losing their favorite character. For years, maybe even your whole life, they tried shaping the way the world saw you. They needed you predictable, agreeable, moldable. Every reaction you gave, every emotion they triggered, every choice they pressured you into was a chapter in the story they were writing for their own benefit. You were never meant to be the hero in their version. You were meant to be the manageable one, the underestimated one, the dependent one. But chosen ones never stay where they're placed. They grow, they evolve, they outsmart the script. And here's what they never expected. You woke up. You began noticing that the story they tried to stick you in didn't fit anymore. You felt the discomfort, the tightness, the restriction. And instead of shrinking yourself to fit their narrative, you expanded. You outgrew the part. You outgrew the stage. You outgrew them. And the moment you did, everything they built began to unravel. Chosen ones do not announce their evolution, it just shows. Suddenly, you're making decisions they never saw coming. You're speaking in ways that don't match the character they designed. You're acting with clarity they didn't think you were capable of. You're moving with a strength they hoped you would never discover. And just like that, their script became irrelevant, outdated, obsolete. But here's the part that hits them the hardest. You didn't expose them by confronting them. You exposed them by being yourself. Authenticity is the greatest disruption you could ever create, and you did it effortlessly. You didn't need to rally people, defend yourself, or clear your name. Your evolution made their lies look ridiculous. Your confidence made their assumptions collapse. Your independence made their narrative crumble, and they know it. They feel it every time you walk into a room with that new, quiet confidence. They feel it every time they hear your name and realize the world doesn't see you the way they tried to paint you. They feel it every time they notice you're thriving without participating in their distortions. That's the part that terrifies them, the realization that their version of you only worked when you believed it too. The moment you stopped believing, the whole illusion shattered. Chosen ones don't destroy lies by fighting. They destroy lies by living in truth. You became the contradiction to every false story they crafted. You became evidence that their narrative was built on manipulation, fear, and projection, not reality. And here's the thing, once the truth is seen, it can't be unseen. Their story is permanently broken, and they know it. They can't rewrite the past now that you've reclaimed the pen. They can't twist your actions when your actions speak louder than their words. They can't shape your identity when you finally see yourself clearly. The power they once held over perception has evaporated, and that realization leaves them trembling. Chosen one, understand this deeply. They never feared your voice. They feared your clarity. They feared the moment you stepped out of character and into your real self. They feared the moment you stopped feeding the narrative and started writing your own. You didn't just ruin their story, you replaced it with the truth. And nothing terrifies someone who thrives on distortion more than the unstoppable honesty of a chosen one who finally knows their worth. Their script is dead, their narrative is dust, and your transformation is the undeniable evidence they can never erase. Number 3. Your silent survival exposed the limits of their control. You weathered the storm they swore would silence you. The quiet ones don't break. They transform when no one is watching. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about something they never wanted to admit out loud. Something that still shakes them every time your name crosses their mind. You survived what was engineered to ruin you, not simply challenge you, not inconvenience you, ruin you. And the cruel brilliance of their plan was this. They wanted it to happen so quietly that even you wouldn't recognize you were under attack. They counted on your silence, your softness, your patience, your desire to avoid conflict. They thought those traits made you weak. Little did they know, those traits were sharpening you into someone absolutely untouchable. See, chosen ones, the traps set for you were never loud. They were never dramatic or theatrical. No, your opponents understood that loud attacks draw attention, and attention creates accountability. So they moved in the shadows. They used silence as a weapon, neglect as a cage, subtle emotional pressure as shackles. They built an invisible war and expected you to crumble without witnesses, without support, without anyone noticing what you were carrying. In their minds, it was the perfect system. Strip you from the inside while appearing innocent on the outside. But here's where everything backfired for them and shifted in your favor. You didn't collapse. You didn't disintegrate. You didn't shatter under the weight of the invisible warfare they forced on you. Instead, you did the one thing they never predicted you'd be capable of. You endured, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. While they expected you to drown in self-doubt, you were learning how to breathe underwater. While they believed their silence would suffocate you, it only gave you the space to hear yourself more clearly. While they weaponized neglect, you transformed aloneness into self-discovery. Chosen ones, your survival wasn't loud because it didn't need to be. You didn't storm out of the battlefield screaming victory. You simply walked forward, still functioning, still thinking, still choosing yourself, while they were convinced the blows they delivered in secrecy would leave permanent marks. But here's the twist. You healed from wounds they never believed you'd even identify. You rebuilt yourself using pieces they thought they had permanently broken, and you evolved into someone they can no longer influence, intimidate, or predict. That's what terrifies them now. Not your words, not your presence, not your actions. It's the undeniable truth that everything they meant to destroy you with only refined you instead. Every guilt trip made you more aware of manipulation. Every silent punishment strengthened your emotional independence. every attempt to isolate you gave you the room to grow beyond their reach. You became living proof that their control had limits, that their power was conditional, that their influence was only ever as strong as your willingness to absorb it. And now that you've stepped outside their psychological arena, they can't touch you, they can't intimidate you, they can't even confront you, because doing so would expose everything they hid behind their smiles, their silence, their carefully constructed personas. And what rattles them the most? You survived so quietly that they can't even explain how they lost their grip on you. They can't trace the moment their power began to dissolve. They can't pinpoint when you stopped bending, or when your resilience stopped suffering in silence and started growing in strength. All they know is that one day, the version of you they could push around disappeared, and the version standing before them now doesn't flinch, doesn't fold, and doesn't need their approval to breathe. Chosen ones, your silent survival is your most dangerous asset. It's the weapon they never saw coming. It's the evidence they can't erase, and it's the reason they're absolutely terrified, because if you could withstand the battles they thought would break you, then they know there is nothing left they can do to stop the version of you that rose from them. Your quiet endurance became your loudest victory, and now they feel every ounce of the fear they once hoped you'd drown in. Number 4. Your unplanned evolution broke the boundaries. They drew around you. When your growth outran the walls, they built around you. The moment you outgrow the box someone tried to keep you in, the box doesn't just break, their ego breaks with it. My dear chosen ones, this is where the story stops being quiet and starts becoming undeniable. Because this part of your journey, this unexpected evolution they never prepared for, is exactly why they're trembling now. They thought they had you figured out like a puzzle with missing pieces. They believed they had mapped out your reactions, your limits, your doubts, even your dreams. They convinced themselves that you were predictable, containable, easy to keep beneath their thumb. But here's the part that hits them the hardest. You didn't grow on their schedule, and you didn't grow in the direction they tried to force you into. You grew everywhere they weren't looking. Chosen ones, they built small rooms around you because they feared the size of your potential. They mistook your silence for stagnation. They thought your patience meant paralysis. They assumed that if they restricted your environment, they could restrict your evolution. But growth, real growth, is like water. It finds a way. It seeps into cracks. It expands quietly. It transforms without permission. You weren't waiting for validation. You weren't waiting for applause. You weren't waiting for someone to say, "Okay, now you're allowed to rise." No. You grew simply because you could. Because it was in you all along, and while they were busy trying to keep you small, you were busy becoming someone they never imagined they'd have to face. What terrifies them, chosen ones, is not that you changed, it's that you changed beyond their awareness. They didn't get to study the stages of your evolution. They didn't get to anticipate the moment your doubt turned into discernment. They didn't get to rehearse how they would respond when you finally saw through the tactics they thought were brilliant. You evolved without their supervision, without their permission, without leaving them a warning sign. And that kind of growth is the most threatening kind because it cannot be undone, reversed, or contained. Think of it this way. They planted weeds around you to choke your confidence, and instead you grew roots so deep they couldn't pull you out. They placed ceilings above you, and you learned to rise through cracks like light. They built fences thinking you would stop at the boundary, and you learned to climb. They wanted you predictable, but you became powerful. They wanted you manageable, but you became unstoppable. They wanted you dependent, but you became self-sustaining. And now, every new skill you develop, every boundary you hold firm, every decision you make with clarity is a reminder to them that they never controlled you. They only controlled the version of you that didn't know its strength yet. Chosen ones, Your growth didn't just shock them, it exposed them. It revealed how deeply they miscalculated you. It revealed how desperately they relied on your compliance. It revealed that their influence had an expiration date, and you, quietly, calmly, reached it. They can't predict you anymore. They can't manipulate you the way they used to. They can't pull strings you've already cut. And that loss of control, that collapse of the illusion they built, is what keeps them uneasy, confused, and intimidated by the person you've become. Understand something powerful. Your growth isn't just a personal victory, it is a mirror they cannot escape. When they look at you now, they don't just see your strength. They see every moment they underestimated you. They see every assumption that fell apart. They see the end of the influence they thought was permanent. You proved that their power was never real. It was conditional, fragile, dependent entirely on you staying unaware of who you truly were. But now, you've outgrown the environment they designed to limit you. You've expanded beyond the version of yourself they felt comfortable controlling. You're no longer accessible in the ways they relied on. You're no longer contained by the boundaries they drew. You're no longer predictable enough to manipulate. You, chosen one, have become the one thing they never planned for. A version of yourself that answers to no one's expectations but your own. And that realization doesn't just shake them, it terrifies them. Because once a chosen one grows beyond the cage, nothing and no one can force them back inside. Number 5. Your calm silence became the lock that closed their access forever. When your silence became the wall they could no longer climb. Nothing shakes a manipulator more than the moment their favorite button stops working. My dear chosen ones, this is the part they never expected, the twist in your story that rattled them straight to their core. Because for years, yes, years, they banked on your reactions. They counted on your emotional spark, your explanations, your defenses, your attempts to prove your heart, your intentions, your worth. They treated your feelings like switches they could flip, levers they could pull, triggers they could press any time they wanted to feel powerful. You were their emotional power source, and they fed off every rise, every crack, every moment you handed them access to your inner world. But then something shifted in you, quietly, subtly, without drama, without warning. And chosen ones, that shift was louder than any argument you ever had. You didn't rage, you didn't shut down, you didn't plot revenge, you simply stopped reacting. You stepped back from the emotional battlefield they dragged you into again and again, and that was the one move they never prepared for. They spent so long studying you, your tells, your body language, your tone, your vulnerabilities. They memorized what provoked you, what softened you, what guilted you, what kept you explaining yourself. And suddenly, none of it worked. Their tricks fell flat. Their guilt trips died mid-air. Their subtle digs bounced off unshaken walls. Your detachment became the silence that exposed everything they tried to hide. You didn't do it out of coldness. You did it out of clarity. Because the moment a chosen one realizes the truth, everything changes. You saw how reacting on their terms fed a game you never agreed to play. You saw how your emotional responses were the rope they used to pull you in and control the narrative. And once that understanding locked in, your silence became your strength. They didn't know what to do with that version of you. They'd never met them before. Suddenly, the person who used to explain, justify, defend, or try to find peace through dialogue went quiet, composed, calm, unbothered. And that calmness, oh, chosen one, that calmness hit them harder than any confrontation ever could. Because silence is not emptiness. Silence is clarity. Silence is control. Silence is a boundary they cannot cross unless you open the door. You didn't lift a sword, and yet their influence broke anyway. You didn't raise your voice, and yet your silence echoed louder. You didn't retaliate. You evolved. And evolution terrifies those who must keep you small to feel big. They tried everything after that. They poked, prodded, baited, tested. They tried emotional grenades disguised as casual comments. They tried guilt wrapped in concern. They tried playing the victim. But your lack of reaction didn't come from apathy. It came from wisdom. It came from knowing that anyone who needs your emotional chaos to stay relevant was never offering anything real to begin with. And here's what chosen ones always ask at this point. Why does my silence bother them so much? Why does my peace disturb them more than my anger ever did? The answer is simple, because silence removes their access. And access was the only real power they ever had. Your reactions once fed their ego. Your emotional responses once validated their control. Your defenses once confirmed that they still mattered in your world. But when you stopped responding, you stopped participating. You stopped fueling the fire they kept trying to light around you. You stopped giving them proof that they still had space in your mind. You became unreachable, not because you ran, but because you grew. And nothing is more terrifying to someone who relies on your emotional surrender than your refusal to hand it over. Now, when they look at you, they don't see the person they used to manipulate. They see someone untouchable, unreadable, unpredictable, someone who outgrew their tactics, someone who retracted the power they once freely gave. Chosen one, your silence became the line they cannot cross. Your composure became the mirror reflecting every failed attempt to shake you. And now they're left scrambling because all their tools, all their strategies, all their psychological shortcuts have become utterly useless. You didn't defeat them with force. You defeated them with maturity, with self-respect, with emotional discipline, with the simple decision to no longer dance to their rhythm. And that, my dear chosen ones, is why they're absolutely terrified. Number 6. When your independence revealed they were never essential. When your independence exposed their irrelevance. The day you stopped needing them wasn't the day you lost anything. It was the day they realized they never had anything. My dear chosen ones, this is the moment that shakes them to their core, not because you attacked them, not because you confronted them, but because you finally saw the truth they prayed you'd never notice. And that truth hit them like a silent earthquake. They were never the pillar in your life. Just a piece of furniture you walked around until you no longer needed it in the room. For so long, they lived in a fantasy where they were the center of your world. They convinced themselves their presence made you whole, their input made you capable, and their approval made you valuable. They depended on the belief that you depended on them. That belief was their lifeline, their comfort blanket, their ego's oxygen supply. And as long as you played along, they breathed easy. But chosen ones don't stay asleep forever. You didn't make a grand declaration. You didn't warn them that your mindset was shifting. You didn't announce that you were no longer borrowing your identity from their opinions. You simply grew out of the version of yourself they were comfortable controlling. That's the thing about chosen ones. You evolve quietly, but the impact is thunderous. And when you stopped looking to them for direction, validation, or reassurance, the panic set in. They felt the shift in ways you didn't fully recognize at first. They felt it in your silence, in your steady tone, in your decisions that no longer revolved around them, in the way you carried yourself without reaching for their input. They watched you step into the world with a confidence that didn't include them, and to them, that wasn't just change, it was collapse. They weren't used to seeing you operate without them. They weren't prepared for the possibility that their importance was something you had been tolerating, not valuing. And when that realization hit them, it dismantled their carefully crafted sense of superiority. Imagine someone sitting on a throne they built out of your insecurities, only to watch you walk away, revealing the throne was made of cardboard. That's what happened. They didn't lose a seat of authority. They lost the illusion of it. Chosen ones, listen closely. People who rely on being needed fear nothing more than the moment you become self-sufficient. Because your independence exposes the truth they worked hard to bury, not just from you, but from themselves. A truth that whispers, you were never essential. You were simply allowed to stay. And that's what terrifies them. They thrived in the space where you doubted yourself, second-guessed your choices, or leaned on them for emotional clarity. But once you reclaimed your own voice, their influence dissolved. Every guilt trip they tried to send your way, blocked. Every emotional ploy meant to pull you back, ineffective. Every subtle attempt to make you feel responsible for their happiness, powerless. You didn't go to war. You didn't expose them publicly. You didn't even try to teach them a lesson. You just chose yourself, quietly, consistently, unapologetically. And that act, that simple act of choosing you over their control, was the most devastating blow you could deliver, because nothing destroys a manipulator faster than realizing you don't need them, not their validation, not their presence, not their permission. Your independence is the mirror they can't escape. It shows them exactly who they are without the power they believed they had, and it forces them to confront the uncomfortable truth. Their role in your life was temporary, replaceable, and ultimately irrelevant. My chosen ones understand this deeply. Your ability to detach without bitterness, to walk away without theatrics, and to live fully without their involvement is the kind of strength that unsettles the insecure. It exposes them not through accusation, but through your evolution. You didn't ruin their importance. You revealed they never had any. And that truth, that quiet, undeniable truth, is what leaves them absolutely terrified. Number 7. Your awareness turned their hidden motives into open secrets. When you saw through the smoke they thought would blind you. The moment a mask slips, it's not the noise that destroys them. It's your silence that tells them you saw everything. My dear chosen ones, this is the part that rattles the enemy right down to the core. Not because you exposed them in public, not because you confronted them with fire and fury. No, what terrified them was far quieter, far sharper, far more devastating. You saw them. You saw exactly what they were doing, even when they worked overtime to make sure you never would. And instead of exploding, instead of defending yourself, instead of scrambling to prove anything, you simply adjusted your behavior. That small shift, that silent recognition, was enough to make their confidence crumble like cheap plaster. You must understand this, chosen ones. People like that survive on shadows. They thrive in the dim corners where intention is unclear, where manipulation can hide behind charm, where dishonesty masquerades as concern. They build their entire strategy around the hope, the assumption that you will never notice. And they counted on you staying in that fog forever. Because as long as you didn't see their motives, they could keep shaping your reality, bending your emotions, and controlling the narrative. They believed their secrecy made them powerful. But something inside you woke up. You started catching the pauses that didn't match their words. You noticed the small patterns, the way their tone shifted, the inconsistencies in their stories, the little slips they assumed you were too distracted to catch. They underestimated the clarity of a chosen one. You read between lines they didn't even know they were writing. You understood things you never voiced, and that's what terrified them. It wasn't that you were loud, it was that you became aware. They always thought if the day came when you figured them out, you'd announce it, accuse them, challenge them. But you didn't, and that confused them more than anything, because your silence wasn't ignorance, it was understanding. You weren't losing control, you were reclaiming it. You weren't swallowing their version of the story anymore. You were rewriting your own. No speeches, no scenes, no drama, just a shift in the way you moved, in the way you responded, in the way you no longer reacted on command. Chosen ones, this is the moment when manipulators panic the most. When your actions, calm, intentional, self-respecting, reflect a truth you never had to speak out loud. They saw it in the way you walked away from conversations you once entertained. They felt it when you stopped giving them chances they never deserved. They sensed it when your energy no longer bent to accommodate their hidden agendas. Your awareness became the weapon they didn't see coming. No confrontation could have scared them the way your quiet clarity did, because confrontation they can handle. They can twist it, manipulate it, or reshape it. But how do they manipulate someone who no longer absorbs the bait? Someone whose mind is sharp enough to detect their motives, yet composed enough not to hand them the emotional reaction they depend on. They expected chaos. You gave them composure. They expected arguments. You gave them boundaries. They expected you to fall apart. You gave them distance. That is why they're terrified. Every move they make now feels unstable, exposed, risky, because they know you can see the intent behind it. They can no longer hide in suggestion, implication, or psychological games. They can't disguise their motives under smiles or concern. Their entire strategy collapses the moment you stop mistaking manipulation for care. And the truth is, chosen one, you didn't have to ruin their reputation. You didn't have to gather evidence. You didn't have to warn anyone. You simply became the living contradiction to their lies. Your life, your choices, your calm detachment, those became proof. You turned every hidden scheme into a transparent window they can't cover anymore. What destroys them is not that you acted against them. What destroys them is that you simply stopped playing along. And nothing shakes a manipulator more than realizing the chosen one they tried to outsmart saw everything and chose freedom instead of revenge. You have no idea what you did, but they do. And that's why they're absolutely terrified. Number 8. Your healing dismantled the strategy built to keep you small. When your healing turned their entire strategy to dust. The moment you stopped bleeding, their weapons became useless. My dear chosen ones, this is the part that rattles them the most, because out of everything you've ever done, every shift, every boundary, every moment of clarity, nothing shook them harder than the day you started healing in ways they never prepared for. They had built an entire blueprint around your pain. Your wounds were their leverage. Your insecurities were their playground. Your doubts were the strings they pulled whenever they needed control. They counted on your broken pieces staying scattered forever, because as long as you were fragmented, they had a way in. But you did the one thing they never calculated for. You stitched yourself back together, and not in the shallow, temporary way people sometimes do just to get by. No. You healed at the roots. You reinforced the foundation they assumed would crumble. You rebuilt parts of yourself they were certain would remain damaged. And that level of healing, the deep, internal, quiet kind, was the actual earthquake that tore their entire strategy apart. You see, chosen ones, people who depend on your pain for power, fear one thing above all else: your recovery. Because your recovery exposes the truth about their tactics. It shows them that every subtle manipulation, every guilt trip, every attempt to keep you small was never as effective as they convinced themselves it was. They wanted your pain to be permanent. They wanted your wounds to stay open so they could use them like access points. But you closed the doors, you sealed the cracks, you refused to stay defined by what hurt you. And that's when the panic began. They felt it the moment your responses changed, when their old triggers stopped working, when you no longer reacted with fear, confusion, or self-doubt. Suddenly their influence didn't just weaken, it evaporated. Because without your suffering, without your vulnerability being weaponized, they had no strategy left. They weren't dealing with the wounded version of you anymore. They were facing someone who had transformed their scars into armor. And that armor? It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, it wasn't theatrical. It was composed, grounded, unwavering. The kind of strength that doesn't need to threaten or defend. It simply stands. And chosen ones, nothing terrifies manipulators more than someone who no longer breaks where they expect cracks, They built their plans on the assumption that you would stay emotionally dependent, mentally tangled, easy to destabilize. But every time you chose healing over hurt, clarity over confusion, growth over stagnation, you proved them wrong. Every step forward you took silently invalidated years of their schemes. They watched the version of you they depended on slipping away, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and entirely self-governed. And that truth hits them harder than any confrontation ever could. Because now, when they look at you, they see a mirror reflecting everything they failed to keep you from becoming. Your resilience throws their intentions into sharp relief. Your progress highlights their behavior. Your strength makes their tactics look childish, desperate, and ineffective. They're forced to face a reality they never wanted to acknowledge. All of their efforts to keep you small were wasted. Their influence was conditional, their power was imaginary, and their control relied solely on your wounds staying open. But you healed. And that healing was the ultimate rebellion. Chosen ones understand this deeply. Your healing didn't just free you, it exposed them. It revealed their strategies, shattered their illusions, and proved that their power was never real. They can't rewrite what happened. They can't reverse your growth. They can't re-injure a version of you that no longer exists. And that's why they're absolutely terrified, because your healing is not temporary, it's not a phase, it's not fragile. It is a permanent shift in your identity, one they cannot undo, cannot influence, and cannot control. Every day you move forward reinforces the truth. You are no longer reachable by the hands that once held you down. Your evolution is the evidence, your strength is the closure, and your healing is the final confirmation that their strategy, from beginning to end, was destined to fail the moment you chose to rise. This is the part they never saw coming. But you, chosen one, you were always built for this. Number 9. Your unshakable self-respect became the force they can't manipulate. The day your self-respect pulled the rug out from under them. Nothing scares a manipulator more than the moment their favorite puppet cuts the strings. My dear chosen ones, this is where everything turned upside down for them, and right side up for you. Because out of everything you ever did, out of every shift, every boundary, every quiet step forward, nothing hit them harder than the moment you chose self-respect over self-sacrifice. For so long they fed on the spaces where you bent. Every compromise you made, every moment you minimized your needs, every time you swallowed your discomfort to keep the peace, it all became the fuel for their false sense of power. They didn't need to shout or scheme loudly. They didn't need to declare dominance. Your silence did the heavy lifting for them. Your compassion, your patience, your willingness to accommodate became the very ladder they climbed to feel taller. But then something inside you shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but unmistakably. You started valuing yourself in ways they never prepared for. You began choosing your peace without guilt. You stopped explaining yourself to people who already understood exactly what they were doing. You stopped overgiving to people who never intended to give back. And most importantly, my chosen ones, you stopped abandoning yourself to keep anyone else comfortable. And that was the earthquake. Because self-respect is not just a mindset, it is a boundary wrapped in armor. It is a force that rewrites the terms without ever raising your voice. It is the quiet but unmistakable message that says, I am no longer accessible through disrespect. When you made that shift, their entire playbook turned to dust. Every old tactic fell flat. Every guilt trip hit a wall. Every subtle pressure bounced back like they were pushing against a locked door. They suddenly realized they had no more leverage, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting at all. And here's what truly terrifies them. Your self-respect made them irrelevant. Before, they relied on predictable reactions, your concern, your empathy, your desire to make things right. But now, your composure is a weapon they can't deflect. Your calm disrupts their chaos. Your silence exposes their noise. Your clarity reveals their games without a single accusation spoken. They see it in the way you walk now, steady, grounded, untouched by their attempts to shake you. They feel it every time you respond with neutrality to something that once would have stolen your peace. They sense it when you no longer tap dance around their emotions or apologize for simply existing. You became untouchable, not because you hardened, but because you honored yourself. And chosen ones, that is a language manipulators cannot translate. Their old advantages evaporated because they were never real to begin with. Their power always relied on the illusion that you needed them, that you would tolerate anything to keep harmony, that you would always bend just enough to let them feel in control. But now, you don't bend, you don't break, you don't barter your worth, you simply stand. And standing firmly, confidently, unapologetically is the one thing they never expected you to do. That single act dismantled every advantage they built, exposed every dependency they hid behind, and revealed just how fragile their sense of control really was. You didn't destroy them. Your self-respect destroyed the version of you they benefited from. And that, chosen ones, is the kind of transformation that keeps them absolutely terrified, because it proves that their power never existed. It was borrowed from you. And now, you've taken it back. And now, my chosen ones, as everything settles into place, the truth stands clearer than ever. You didn't just change, you rewrote the entire dynamic without lifting a finger. Their fear is the proof. Their silence is the confession, and your evolution is the final word. If this message hit home, stay with us on this journey. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop the number 77 in the comments to claim the strength you've stepped into. And share this with someone who needs to understand the power of their own awakening. Your rise is only beginning.